Welcome back. The NRA's annual convention taking place right now in Indianapolis. Donald Trump is scheduled to speak in a few minutes from now. Most of the announced or potential presidential candidates have also addressed convention goers, either live or, in the case of Ron DeSantis, sending a video message. This year's convention comes amid the backdrop of two recent high-profile mass shootings, and actually in the same region as where this is. One was at a school in Nashville, and the other was at a bank in Louisville, neither place very far from Indianapolis. Former Vice President Mike Pence addressed those tragedies earlier today when he spoke.
Ignoring the motivations of the trans activists who killed 3 children and 3 adults at that Christian school in Nashville, and ignoring the mental health challenges of the man who killed 5 people and injured 8 others in Louisville, President Biden and the Democrats have returned to the same tired arguments about gun control and gun confiscation. But we don't need gun control. We need crime control. We don't need lectures about the liberties of law-abiding citizens. We need solutions to protect our kids.
Now, that was not the part where he was booed. He was booed at some parts and called a traitor. That, of course, having to do with his relationship to Donald Trump. This year's convention is hardly the first NRA gathering to take place with a deadly mass shooting event basically hovering over the event. Last year's convention came just days after the Uvalde school shooting, which killed 19 children and 2 teachers, and weeks after a white supremacist killed 10 people in a shooting spree at a Buffalo supermarket. The 2019 NRA convention was taking place as a gunman opened fire inside a Southern California synagogue during Passover. And back in 1999, the NRA convention started 10 days and about 15 miles from the Columbine High School, where 2 students killed 13 people and injured more than 20 others. Joining me now on set is Tia Mitchell, Washington correspondent for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, Navin Nayak, Democratic strategist and president and executive director of the Center for American Progress Action Fund, and Stephen Hayes, the editor and CEO of The Dispatch, as well as an NBC News political analyst. Stephen, let me start with you and the idea that Mike Pence, who arguably is ideologically in step with the NRA, with so many major conservative institutions, that just because of his relationship with Donald Trump, he's considered persona non grata, called a traitor.
Yeah, I mean, it's a reflection of where the Republican Party is today. And we've seen this now over the course of several years. Look back to the Republican convention in 2020 and the lack of an actual platform. There's not a policy prescription. If you're a Republican these days, it's your loyalty to Donald Trump. Now, I think that we're seeing that change at the sort of grassroots level. You have a hardcore base that supports Donald Trump, but you have a bigger collection, I think a growing collection of people who say enough is enough. That's who I think Mike Pence needs to appeal to, but he's, you know, as you were discussing in your earlier segment, they're caught between a rock and a hard place because they don't want to alienate the Trump loyalists, but they want to appeal to people who are sick of Trump.
Yeah, Tia, Mike Pence strikes me as he's the Bruce Willis candidate in Sixth Sense. And his candidacy, he thinks this candidacy is alive. I don't know if he's going to get a look. I don't know if they're going to give him this look.
Right. To Stephen's point, there is a segment of the Republican Party that's wanting to move on from Trump, but we don't know if that's enough to build a majority coalition that you need to win primaries and win a nomination. And that's where Pence and all the others that are looking to challenge Trump are finding themselves challenged, because where is your lane to really go up against Trump, especially with DeSantis hanging in the wind? Well,
it's funny, Navin. Tim Scott, I've called the sort of the Senate Republican nominee.
Right.
Because every Senate Republican leader, when I ask them, I wish it was Tim Scott. And they talk about it. And they very much, they're the ones that have encouraged him in there. And I asked this person who's been a big encourager, I said, you know, why? For Scott, I said, well, he can unify the party. I said, does the party want to be unified?
Yeah.
And he said, I don't know. And he admitted that. He's like, that's the problem. If it does, Scott can win. Without it, maybe not.
And I think that's exactly the problem the party faces right now, which is how do they unify without Trump? How do they unify with Trump? In both cases, they are really fractured, and no one's really running the experiment. And, you know, Tim Scott is not, in these first few days, of trying to see if there's a non-MAGA wing that actually wants to be the alternative. They're all trying to basically appeal to MAGA without, you know,
what do you,
Trump.
I mean, the question is, unify around what? Like, I believe Tim Scott could be a unifying figure for the Republican Party of 2012 or 2014. Unify around what? I mean, as I just said,
What's
they
the
didn't even
issue?
have a platform in 2020. You talk to Republicans today, you've got a cohort of Republicans who would be comfortable with a Mitt Romney candidacy or somebody like that. And then you've got this base, this Trumpy base. Republicans can't win a general election without the people who are skeptical of Trump. We've seen that, I think, pretty clearly. But it's hard to win a Republican nomination unless you win the hardcore Trump voters.
It's this conundrum that they have here. And Tia, if you were the Biden White House, on one hand, you're ecstatic about all this. But his numbers never improve. And things don't seem to look rosier other than, it's almost like you look over here, you're like, ooh, that car's a mess. And then you look over here, you're like, I can't even drive that car. I mean, that's what you end up looking like.
Yeah, I mean, and to me, that looks like that's the Biden strategy right now. It's like, let the Republicans continue to make each other look crazy or, make themselves create challenges for themselves. And Biden will just lay low, or not even lay low. Biden will focus on what he's done and trying to sell himself as like the president for the people. And hopefully that'll work out when it comes a one-on-one competition. Now, that's leaving a lot to be, a lot up to what could happen over the next year.
But we heard this argument in 2016, Navin. Oh, just wait till it's Trump and one other.
Right.
In the primary.
In the primary. And that's what it'll come. Because Trump doesn't have 50% until he got 50%.
Yeah.
Right?
That to me is just really the challenge. And no one wants to take him on. And I think that's the experiment that someone has to be willing to run. And, Asa Hutchinson maybe, but it has to be someone with some stature. And Ron DeSantis keeps doing this.
Well, what do you make of
both
DeSantis,
ways.
Steve? He feels like I feel like we're watching him shrink before our eyes. Yeah. The guy in January looked like this potential huge stalking horse. And you're like, oh. And now, he strikes me as somebody who's constantly sailing, but literally tacking. Oh, I got to do this. I got to do this. Right. And it's almost he's hearing everybody's criticism and responding to everybody's criticism.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, he's obviously had a rough patch here. It seems to me that his campaign and maybe the candidate himself is having a hard time deciding whether he wants to try to split the Trump coalition, the MAGA voters that I think all agree are likely to be needed to win the Republican nomination, or if he can build a coalition that doesn't require winning them. As of right now, he certainly seems to be courting the Trump base. I mean, if you look at his outreach to the so-called national conservative movement and the kinds of policies that he's advocated, they're a departure from policies that he's believed in and argued for in years past, but they're popular with that Republican base right now.
Donald Trump's going on the air to you with an attack ad, hitting DeSantis on social. He is really trying to make this. He wants everybody to think of DeSantis inside the party as the guy who wants to cut Social Security. And DeSantis is not doing anything to inoculate himself on this. I think he's not paying enough attention to this problem.
I found the ad so interesting because, of
The
course,
pudding ad.
it's about policy, but it's also about trolling DeSantis.
By the way, I had to Google the pudding story. I hadn't.
Oh, you hadn't heard about the pudding.
But now you know about it, right? I mean,
no, I did have to Google it because some of us have decided to try to cover politics without going on social media. By the way, my life's been terrific.
That's better.
And but that's the thing. It's not just about dinging him on policy. It's about, trying to humiliate him, trying to marginalize him, which we know Trump does really well to his opponents. But your point is made that DeSantis is not hitting back, partially because he hasn't seemed to figure out what he wants to do about Trump and the big Trump base of the party.
Before we go, I want to play a clip. I'm going to get into this Dianne Feinstein business, Navin. Let me play a clip of what Senator Klobuchar had to say about about how Democrats are going about trying to push her out of office. Take a listen.
Do you have confidence that she can continue to fulfill her constitutional duties as the senator from California?
Well, I'm hopeful that she can. Again, I want to see what happens in the next month or so. You give her that time to be able to come back. But if she can't come back month after month after month with this close Senate, that's not just going to hurt California. It's going to be an issue for the country.
I mean, I understand that when it comes to judicial nominations, the ends justifies the means in our politics these days. We can discuss who started it. I don't want to get into that debate. But this just seems like a bad look of just trying to push an old lady out of office?
I mean, I think that there's been a handful of people who have kind of gone there.
You think it's gone too far?
I mean, I do think this is a woman who's given her life to public service.
Almost literally gave her life
right.
for public service.
Yes.
I mean, bullets went by her, okay?
Absolutely.
I mean,
and so I do think most people have landed in the place of, let's give her time to see if she's healthy and can come back. I think she would be the first person to say that if her recovery does take months, it really doesn't make sense. And listen, the courts and the importance of the courts, it's not just, I mean, the significance now when we talk about abortion, we talk about gerrymandering, voting rights.
I
think
understand.
People sort of appreciate.
I get it.
Yeah.
It is like, I had Brad Todd on here yesterday, Steve. I said, geez, if this were the Senate Finance Committee and somebody had to step aside and replace, it would be no problem. And I'm like, so Republicans, knowing that they have Chuck Grassley, who could also become an issue for them. And he says, nope, not when it comes to judges. There's no cooperation between the two parties.
Yeah, it's very different. I mean, it is the issue that's polarized Washington long before this moment.
Oh, it's destroying this. I think it's destroying our politics, or this obsession.
But I would disagree with you on Dianne Feinstein. Her problems have been an open secret, not for weeks, not for months, for years. Reporters around Capitol Hill tiptoe around asking questions of her that they ask every single other member of Congress because they're worried about making her look bad. From a human level, I mean, this is true of conservative reporters and liberal reporters.
This was done to Thad Cochran. This was done to Trump. This was done. The point is, it does seem like she's being treated slightly differently than some of these old guys.
I mean, I thought not Thad Cochran. I mean, certainly not near the end of his time. And there were questions about that.
I know, but nobody pushed him out of office.
Yeah, I mean, I think we should have it's better if we can have an open and honest debate about people who aren't capable of serving in office.
I don't think there are a lot of good actors here, Tia. I think the senator's family's not looking out for her. I think the senator's staff is not looking out for her. I think everybody's thinking about politics. Nobody's thinking about the person.
Right.
And I think about the person, yes, and if she's not doing well, she probably shouldn't be serving in Congress.
Where's her family? That's what I'm wondering. Where's her family to sort of help in this situation?
Also, we have to think, this is a nation of several hundred million people, and there are only 100 senators and 435 members of the House, and you want them all to be healthy and cognizant and working hard for the American people. And if you're one of 100 and you can't do your job, and I'm not going to say about age, but for whatever reason, in the long term, that's not good for the country.
No, it's all true. It does seem like it's selective depending on the person.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.